Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to see you. Welcome back again. This lovely fall day here in the Chicago area where I am. It's very beautiful. Had a little Halloween fest for the kiddos in the town square here in Elmhurst, where I live in Illinois. Good to see you all. All right. We'll give a few more minutes as people start shuffling in or continue to shuffle in to the room here. But today's going to be a focus on some future developments for the project. I'm very excited about some endeavors coming up here. Now, a few of the things we talked about last week, and I'm excited about getting further input from you all on those type of things. We can sort of revisit and recap because in essence, we took a little bit longer to go through the topics at hand last time than we had planned, and so there were some things left over. And then, in addition to that, I'd love to dive into this other concept here to talk about, which is to be discussed, and then also we'll check in on some of the content that we just put together for Joe Jackson's masterclass, which is really great. Okay, what I'll do now is give an official intro to the session. Let me spotlight myself. And then for those of you out on Facebook and YouTube, we'll get a link into the chat so you can join us here momentarily. But first, let's give an intro. So welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. This is a special show here that we do every week. And what we do here is we meet with and we learn from the most fascinating, interesting, talented folks in the piano world. And this, of course, includes manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And I think, what we can do first off here is do a little bit of a recap from last week's session. Last week, we put a few items on the table about upcoming endeavors of Piano Technicians Masterclasses, wanted to get you all your opinions, so on and so forth. And so let's do a quick review of what we talked about and see if you guys have anything interesting to share as we wrap up those topics. And so specifically in last week's session, we were talking about some potential masterclass topics for upcoming masterclasses. We were talking about, radio hour topics as well for upcoming radio hours. And we touched upon the concept of some professional development events that could happen over the summer time. And there were kind of three main types that we discussed that included, like a actual in-person convention style thing, as well as an online convention style thing, as well as a potential meetup. It was a little bit more, call it like an educational or professional, almost vacation or getaway, or sort of some type of development event. Might be a smaller group of people with a very focused topic. Maybe we would try to pick a setting that was in the line with the summer, kind of taking advantage of our summers here as a time to get away and refresh and rejuvenate. So on those topics, of course, some of the things that came up in last week's session was, we might talk about masterclass and bass strings and restoring them. We could talk about choosing hammer types, epoxy techniques for soundboards, which we have covered a little bit, but we could continue to cover. We also talked about maybe some advanced integrative discussions of tuning and voicing. And then we also talked about these events, and of course, I've also done a little bit of research on the side, talking to some folks in the area. And I think one thing that came up in my conversations offline is people are interested in action balancing and action work, and sort of developing both the weight and the geometry side of things, and getting expert opinion, maybe doing a deep dive on something like that. So I'm curious if folks are interested in further developments in that direction. And that's a recap of kind of what we talked about last week. Of course, if anybody is getting inspired as we talk about it right now to share an opinion or a thought about what kind of topics we might want to cover in the coming year, let me know, and I will be continuing to speak with the community about these possibilities. One thing I think would be cool to do a transition into now is to share with you all a little bit of the footage from our damper, pedal, trap work, back action masterclass series with Joe Jackson in St. Louis. I'm really excited about the type of content we were able to gather. Great footage, great audio, great concepts, really, really covering a lot of useful stuff. And so I thought, we'll at least share a little bit of the content so you get the vibe of it. And of course, we can share links in the chat for how you can sign up to be a part of that in the future as well. Let me pull that up right now, and I'll share that with you. So just give me one moment for that. Let's get that loaded up. We'll do a full screen, and we'll do the screen share. Let's see here. Okay, now we want this. All right, so y'all should be able to see it, and you'll kind of get a sense of the vibe of the class, and what we're talking about, and what kind of quality you can expect from this series.
Welcome to the Piano Technicians Masterclass. My name is Joe Jackson, and I'm here to talk about back action work, damper work, pedal work, and all of the ins and outs of making sure the piano stops on time, or as the Germans like to say, the shutters work. So some of the things we're going to go over are the initial things you're going to need to do this kind of work. Right now, our first instrument, the instrument we're going to work on for the day, is a Steinway A. And we have some samples of different lyres that we're going to work on. Some things you're going to need: Phillips head, flat head of 2 different sizes at least. I like to do a 3/16 and a 1/4 inch. A very small, thin blade. Okay, this is for the damper tab screws. They're very small and delicate, and you need a nice, very small blade. They're a little hard to find exactly what you want. Dig around, you'll find them. Some other things we're going to need are over here. To do the internal work with the felt, we will need a variety of options to turn to. You're going to want to have on hand leather. You can get this at Piano Tech. No, sorry, they don't exist. You can get this at Shaft or Pacific Piano. High quality, dense Bellyman felt. Okay. A guillotine. Dense white felts. A rolling cutting blade. Felt cutting scissors. A rolling measurable cutting blade, and a mat to work on.
All right, let me unshare here. Okay, great. So you can get a sense. I mean, it's just a little bit of the intro content, but you get a sense that we got some good quality in terms of the audio, video, the discussion topic, and particularly what we were able to cover in this visit was got a lot of content on number one, we went into like diagnosing issues. So what are all the tests you can do to check all of the pedals, left pedal, middle pedal, right pedal, sostenuto, sustain, and what you look for, what are the type of problems that arise, when you look at the dampers, when you listen to sounds, what are the common complaints that clients have, and how can you investigate further what they are, and then really going into detail on how you, in this particular class, can rebuild the damper and trap work system. And in future classes, we'll talk about the dampers and the back action. We have some content on that, but that is for next month's lecture. But everything from removing the trap work to what kind of trap work can you expect to see on different types of pianos, because it's not all the same. How our sostenuto is different on different pianos. What to look out for when you're removing the trap work stuff. There's a lot of, there can be springs and sort of unexpected differences between all sorts of models and makes of pianos. So what to watch out for there, how to recondition those kind of parts, right? There might be leathers that are worn away or cloth that needs to be replaced. How do you go about that? How do you do it efficiently? How do you maybe improve on it, something in the design that wasn't working quite well? For example, installing pedal rods that are adjustable, as opposed to in some models of piano, they're non-adjustable pedal rods, where you have to really just kind of sort of pad the system to make it work properly, and then you kind of end up with like a hodgepodge of padding underneath the piano in order to make a pedal work, versus, can you install an adjustable pedal rod, and how does that work, and so on and so forth. So lots of great content, polishing the pedals, making sure they're not squeaking or moving around in some odd way. So anyways, I'm really proud of the content, really excited about it. And I popped a link there in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. And let me just make sure. Did I pop it in here? I didn't pop it in here yet. Let me put that in there. So yeah, that's the Joe Jackson Masterclass Part 2. You can visit that page. You can sign up for it. We'll have all the recorded content ready soon. It'll be posted in the member area soon. So if you want to grab it now, you can. And then of course, we'll have the next installment next month, and we'll have a final installment after that. So a lot of thanks to Joe Jackson for participating. He put a lot of time and effort. Was a gracious host for me a couple of weeks ago, doing some of the filming, so on and so forth. So if there are no other questions or comments regarding everything we talked about so far, we talked about the upcoming content, we talked about professional development opportunities, and so on and so forth. I'd love to transition to give you guys an idea of a new development that it looks like we're going to instantiate here as an outgrowth of the podcast. So one thing that I'm very proud of is the Piano Tech Radio podcast continues to do incredibly well, pretty much on a month by month basis. We're always continuing listenership and downloads, and I'm continuing to hear, and it's always fun to get a surprise email from someone, or to run into someone and have a conversation, and they say, oh yeah, I listened to this episode. I listened to that episode with Tom Strange, from the musical instrument museum, and that was cool. Or I listened to this episode featuring Steve Brady or whatever. So it's pretty cool to see that now there's a buzz around what's going on. I love the people that show up in person, of course, to kind of support the live production of things, but there's also a pretty substantial audience of folks out there across the globe that are paying attention, and the word is spreading. So that's really great. But what I wanted to share with you guys, I don't think that I've shared this in the context of these meetings yet, and I would love to kind of start to get the word out there, potentially get your thoughts, and that could be within this session or by email or something like this. And this is kind of I would say there's a 70% chance at this particular project going forward. So a lot of what we're doing here, including this session, is kind of testing the market feasibility of it. Is it something that makes sense, something that people are excited about? Can we modify it in any way to make it even better than what we're already coming up with? And so I just thought I'd take the time to outline the way the idea is developed in my head so far, along with the folks that I've been speaking with, some of the opportunities for you out there in the audience, as well as the industry in general, what we're thinking of. So the concept is to launch a new podcast that is sort of an extension of what's going on with Piano Tech Radio Hour, but has a little bit more of a general audience appeal. And so, what we're going to see with Piano Tech Radio Hour, of course, is what's nice about it is we have a targeted audience, right? If you're a piano technician and you need something to listen to in the car while you're working out and doing dishes, it's like a no-brainer. And maybe if you're someone like some of the guests that we've had, like Hannah Reimann and some of her friends that are working on the piano innovations, and sort of moving different developments for it, it's a little bit interesting. I've heard particularly she's listened to some episodes of David Clavins, right, or other folks, Del Fondrick or things like that. And so it's great to see, even beyond our community, there's folks that are sort of tangentially related, but that are intrigued by what we're sharing. And my guess is it's a little bit more of a hunt and pack. Like, okay, that episode looks cool. I'll check that one out. I'll check that one out. But who knows? Maybe listen to everyone. It's a little bit hard to see all the specific data on listeners. So I actually have experience now over the past, 5+ years, designing, launching various audio podcast type content, whether it started with the masterclasses back in 2017, a podcast I helped create and co-host with a friend of mine on business, another podcast I hosted in the technology space, a recent podcast in artificial intelligence that just got launched, which is doing really well. I think I shared with you guys. And so given all the knowledge that I've taken from that, there's a lot of things that I can bring to the table and a team I can bring to the table to produce something that has a pretty substantial chance of having a great impact. And so let's talk about what type of content is going to be created. First, what's the type of audience? What are the details of the audience members? What is their maybe potential funding source? What is the potential to integrate it into what we're doing here on the radio hours? And again, any feedback you guys have is great. No pressure. I don't expect you to be the creative masterminds of this, but your potential audience and also your kind of in a sense, like co-founders of this type of thing, because you're on board with this project and you're help fostering in new projects by being a part of what's going on right now and participating and so on and so forth. So what we're envisioning is, and there's a tentative name, and I'll share it now. It's up for change. People like something better, but the name would be the Keyboard Current Podcast. It's a little bit of a play of words. Of course, the current can be the kind of flow of the changes and developments and what's going on with keyboards, right? That can apply all the way back to the first keyboard instruments that were ever created, all the way to modern times, where we're talking about electronic keyboards and synthesizers and so on and so forth. So there's like a current, there's a flow of what's going on with the keyboard instruments. And then beyond that, of course, the other planned words is, what's going on right now, what's currently going on with keyboards. And then, of course, there's just a general ethos of like getting creative, getting kind of flowing with this concept of pianos and keyboards. And so there would be, in the current design, sort of 3 main episode types. And they would all be appealing to the entire audience, but they would sort of focus on different domains. And I'd like to share the episode types first with you guys, and then share kind of the reasoning behind it, I guess, and the purpose of it. Could share the purpose first, or the mission, I guess you might say, of the podcast. But I think we'll just go into the episode types first. So one episode type would be really trying to grab those, call them celebrity piano players or piano enthusiasts, right? And give them a platform to tell a little bit about their story, their connection with pianos and keyboard instruments, and their enthusiasm, right? Especially about acoustic pianos, because as we all know, we're out there tuning pianos in the field for people, right? And we might show up at someone's house. I've got a client here, I won't say their specific name, but in Chicago, I just got reached out to. And, it's a woman that I used to tune for back in Chicago, like 10 years ago. She moved out, but she left her piano in her home. And then, she said, oh, whoever lives there now, I'll let them know you're tuning. And if they want a tuning, they'll reach out to you and so forth. And so this guy reaches out to me, and he's a jazz legend. He's a singing legend of the Chicago area. And it's like, oh, wow, this is great. And he's a singer, right? But he has an acoustic piano, right? Or he has an acoustic piano that he wants to invest in enough to pay for a tuning and develop the instrument. And that's something that you and I know, that there's those personalities out there that publicly they're admired, they're respected, but they might not be connected publicly with the acoustic piano, and their passion and love for and appreciation for an acoustic piano is not really widely known. I mean, you could kind of assume it, but it's not. That story is not out there. So part of that purpose is to bring in that connection with the folks that people know and love and respect, and tell the story of how they connect with the piano, how they love the piano, how they respect the piano. And we're talking specifically about acoustic pianos. I mentioned that we might cover some things around keyboards and synthesizers, but a lot of the purpose of these type of guests, I think we would want to focus on their specific piano, their passion for piano, their connection to acoustic instruments, and why they appreciate them. And so we have them on, we share maybe a bit of the story about that. And it also could be a really great opportunity to maybe have them to do a little performance, right? Have a little piano performance. And so that's one type of episode. So it's personalities sharing about their connection with acoustic pianos, tell a little bit of the story, appreciation for the instrument, and maybe playing a little bit of music. Why not? See if we can get them to do that. Now, the second type of episode is going to be a type that talks about maybe the history, right, of the instrument, right? And we all have read, like the Mario Egret book or some, other specific books that touch upon, where did this all come from? There was the Pantaloon, and there was these different types of dulcimers and all, and then there was Cristofori, and then there was, the double escapement action. And there's been a evolution, there's harpsichords, there's pianos, pianofortes, and then, as we said, all the way up to what's going on now. And there's also just like stories, right? Stories of pianos, everything from, and this is the domain where maybe some of us have enjoyed, books about, the piano shop, the atelier, or the piano fiction book that's sort of like historical fiction that's focused on some story. There's some really fascinating stories in the history of piano, in the personalities of piano. And the approach of these episodes would be kind of in the style of these podcasts that have maybe they focus on popular science, right? So they bring something that's maybe a bit technical or a little bit nerdy, or you might have to be very interested in to understand, but they actually present it in such a way that no matter whether you have a technical knowledge in that domain or not, you're going to find this story fascinating and you're going to learn something. In particular, you may not all be aware of that, but like, Radiolab is a great example of a podcast like this, where they talk about popular science. But they do it in such a way that's really engaging, and it makes people kind of fall in love with the topic. And so, again, these episodes are to tell a story, and I want them to be more highly produced. If you've noticed here, you look at the masterclass content that we create, and so I just showed you a clip from a masterclass. And of course, we like, wherever possible, to produce those at a higher level, good audio, some good video, you know, on the professional, moving towards a professional level of content gathering in terms of the quality. But you know, if you come here to the radio hour, we're not making any pretensions here. The purpose here is just to get together, right? And it's a little bit less formal. It makes it easier for us producing it. And it just makes it easier to keep going with it, to keep continuing on a weekly basis. And so, you know, we'll have a Zoom call, and sometimes somebody will have a PowerPoint presentation, but we don't get too, we don't have like musical transitions or, you know, highly produced scripts and things like that. And a lot of that's just around feasibility and budget, and the purpose of what we're doing here is really just to make sure we have a way to get along and give people some great content. The content is kind of the key. The production value isn't always what's highlighted. But with these stories that we want to tell, we would love to take advantage of the ability to produce a little bit more, and maybe build a team that can execute that. You know, and what that team is depends on the kind of interest we have in the project and the kind of budget that we can build for it. You know, but a great example of a friend I reconnected with, actually used to play music with him in college. He's a professional film composer in Hollywood, and you know, he expressed interest, especially with the strike and some of the sort of instability in the industry. Well, yeah, you know what, this might be an interesting project to come in and bring some of his skills to the table, right? So now you're not only hearing a story about pianos that is maybe a little bit more scripted, right? Maybe there's a script or a loose script or more intentionality around the production and the storyline and so on and so forth. But also, you know, some cool sound design or music involved with it, to really make it more of an experience, right? It's not just the content. Content's great, but to make it an experience where it's almost like a little bit of entertainment. It's like a little bit of an escape. It's a little bit of cultural enrichment. And so that's the way that those type of episodes ideally will be approached. Again, this is dependent on budget, interest, you know, the ability to build a team, and so on and so forth. But that's the second episode type. And the third episode type, I think, can also have a production value to it as well. That maybe involve some of these things like musical transitions and, you know, sound design and scripting and so on and so forth. Now, the third topic, we can apply that type of content, which I mentioned, where you take a technical topic and you make it interesting and engaging. You explore it on a level that could be fascinating to the general public. But this would be actually bringing some of the things that we actually do like to talk about here at Piano Tech Radio Hour, but bringing access to the public around that type of thing. So you and I both know that if we say something like, I think your piano needs some voicing, right? And it's a client it's our first time meeting them, and you know, so we don't have the history of discussing this topic with them, or even your piano might need some regulation, right? Or, you know, oh, there's something you can do to develop the action weight, you know, ratio better here, right? Those things, when you talk to the typical person about them, they're just scratching their head like, wow, I didn't even know that was a thing, right? Or if you actually do have an opportunity to voice their piano to demonstrate, they'll be like, holy cow, I didn't know my piano could sound like that. I just thought if I wanted a better sound, I had to get a better piano. So we all know that the public is just grossly undereducated about the potential of acoustic pianos and all of the things that you can do to make them sound beautiful, and why they are beautiful and sublime and wonderful, and you know, sort of an interesting domain to explore. And so that third type of episode can really serve the purpose of educating the public, and it will educate, you know, you and me as well. It'll be interesting to us. Well, maybe we'll know a little bit about what they're talking about. But just like I might listen to a Radiolab episode, and because I study neuroscience, I know a little bit about what they're talking about. It doesn't make it less interesting. It's okay, cool. Like, this is great. They're talking about something I know about it. Yeah, that is fun. That's a cool way to present it. And so I think that will be the sort of ethos of those type of episodes. We talk about technical things, you know, voicing, regulation, and maybe a crossover with some of those episodes from the other content that I mentioned, like, oh, maybe you're talking about the double escapement action, right? Just give people an idea so they understand their instrument better. It's not such a black box. It's actually interesting and engaging, right? It's not just something that's like, oh yeah, my piano tuner knows about that, but I don't care. Why would I, right? And so if you can see the direction we're going here, did somebody have something to say, or was it an accidental unmute? I'm assuming it was an accident, but if you do have something to share, you're welcome to. Feel free to raise your hand, make a comment in the chat, and we can chat about it. So with this particular type of content, now you can see a little bit more. I've alluded to the direction. I didn't really talk about the mission, like I said up front. It wasn't part of the flow. But the mission here that I think we can achieve, which is really cool, which is a common objective, which everyone out here has, like everyone in this audience here, everyone that's on the email list, everyone that may even feel, I know there's folks out there that are doing education in the piano industry, and maybe they feel like this type of project is like competitive to it. I don't always see it that way, but even people who are competitive to various things that you and I are doing, we all have the objective, and this is in line with what the mission is to uplift the piano industry, right? To encourage passion around pianos, to encourage understanding around pianos. What's a registered piano technician? Why do I need one? Why do I need somebody who's skilled? What's a better tuning? What do I look out for? Things like that. And also to kind of awaken people's awareness to things that you and I, again, know about, but everybody else is kind of losing track of. When they're thinking about getting a piano, they go, oh, it's a keyboard, it's easy, it's lightweight, it's inexpensive, I'll get that, I'm not going to worry about an acoustic piano. But it's because they don't really know the value there. So the mission there is to do something with pianos, with this type of content, that something like Queen's Gambit did to the world of chess. Chess is great. Everybody knows what chess is, but were people running out to the stores, excited, buying chessboards, off the shelves, as much as before that program came about? No. There was something about that program that captured people's imagination and brought the excitement and enthusiasm around that particular topic, such that now people said, oh, aha, yeah, I want to be a part of that. That's cool. So I think that's kind of one of the missions that we can achieve here by producing this content. Not only have fun and enjoy it, I think, but also uplift the entire industry. So that leads to talking about kind of the potential audience of the show, which I kind of alluded to, or you might be able to infer, but it's good to get explicit about this type of thing. It's kind of in my experience in planning out these type of projects. That's an important part. Who's your target audience? Who's going to be listening to this? How are you going to appeal to the different types? And again, it's okay. It's usually good. The general advice is to have at least one kind of listener. They call it like a listener avatar, a personality type that's going to check out this. But it is okay to have up to like 3 or 4 different types that different things are going to appeal to. And so in this particular case, we're going to have probably 3 or 4 types of listeners. Of course, one type is going to be you guys, the folks that are already listening to the Piano Tech Radio Hour. And these are piano nerds, tuners, rebuilders, store owners, manufacturers, just the nerds, and probably even can expand a little bit upon what we have here, because we get pretty technical here. We get pretty specific. We attract pretty specific, almost specific to piano tuners when it really comes down to it. But by expanding the appeal, right, and the topic range and the kind of entertainment value and so forth, we should be able to attract even more, a broader array of folks in the piano industry to be checking out this content. That's kind of an obvious one. Another one is, those people who play piano, and then you have sort of different levels of the piano owners and things like this. You have the folks that are pretty serious about it. Maybe they're a professional piano player and and they just love everything piano. They have to practice all the time. They have to perform these type of things. So that's a type of player that's already sort of passionate about the piano. And then there's another type, which is kind of like those serious sort of families. They have that maybe they have a young child who's getting really into the instrument, and maybe they're playing in competitions, or reaching certain levels and certain exams and certain programs like the Suzuki or something like that. Those families and those kids are going to be interested in this type of content. And also there's sort of going to be some folks that are on the fringe. There's folks, adults and families alike, who are interested in music, interested in the domain. And this is our kind of a bread and butter of sort of building our community. These are people that need to be educated. Maybe they were on the fence, are they going to get a keyboard or a piano? But when they tune into something like this and they enjoy it, and they're getting something interesting out of it, they go, you know what? Yeah, of course I'm going to get an acoustic piano. And you know what? I've heard so many, rich, tales of what the piano is and can be. Yeah, I want to, yeah, I'll get that, spin it today. But you know what? I'd really like to upgrade pretty quickly, to an upright or a grand, or, have ambitions to be having the sort of larger, Bert Bosendorf or Imperial or whatever, because I understand the passion for it. And again, those could be folks who don't even own a piano yet. Maybe their kids are taking music lessons at school. It doesn't require it. Maybe they have a keyboard. It's sort of a low key thing. But by getting this exposure and the passion for it, it makes them easier to lead them down this path towards the acoustic piano and appreciating it. Karin, I appreciate your comment. Karin said these sound like good ideas. Great. I love that. And of course, if you have any others, like if this sort of sparks your imagination, there's no wrong ideas or wrong comments here. You could be like, oh, I think, you should involve, UFOs or whatever. Okay, fine. Maybe that's not a great idea, but share it anyways. I'm always a fan of brainstorming and sort of unfiltered creative energy. Yes, Karin said you particularly like educating the public. So do I. I think it's just, it literally is one of these things. I see that Johan has something to say. We'll bring him on in a minute. But before I do that, I'll say I listened to a podcast. I think some of us may not be aware, but I'm aware of this possibility. Like I said, with Queen's Gambit, right? Or some other program that captured the popular imagination and gets people interested in a domain. There's really a possibility here, right, to capture people's imagination by you sort of catch them more in a general tone, and then you bring them into the focus. And what I wanted to do is give an example that I just came across, that I already had been thinking about this podcast and developing it for months, but just also listened to something recently that reinforced this type of a concept. So there's a podcast, of course, I'm a podcast fan. It's called Tetragrammaton. It's hosted by Rick Rubin, the famous record producer. He produced the Beastie Boys and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Johnny Cash and all these great records. Really great guy. Just published a book on creativity as well. And he happened to have Arnold Schwarzenegger on his podcast. This podcast is other podcast he has called Broken Record, talks more explicitly about music, and the Tetragrammaton kind of lets him talk to whoever he wants. And he had Arnold Schwarzenegger. And why? How does this? What is this? Why is Arnold? What does Arnold Schwarzenegger have to do with pianos? A piano podcast? Piano technicians, all this stuff. Well, what was interesting is they talked through the story of Arnold Schwarzenegger's evolution in his career. And of course, he started like a nobody in Austria, right? He was just a small village in Austria. Nobody knew anything about this guy. And of course, you fast forward to today, and he's, bodybuilder, movie star, politician, he's done all things, we don't even know about. There's so many things he's accomplished, and he's known worldwide. So what he touched upon in this episode, which is really interesting, is that he was passionate about bodybuilding and going to the gym when he was, right? I think this was maybe like in the 70s or something. But if you look back, nobody else was. Right? That was just oh, there's some meatheads that meet in a garage and they like to lift weights, and it was kind of cool, but not really. It was kind of uncool. It was kind of like a fringe thing. There wasn't a huge audience for it. And Arnold touched upon this evolution of the popularity. So he got a passion for it through a small community that was very excited, and about health and nutrition and bodybuilding and so on and so forth. And he, felt that energy. But then once he like won some, early bodybuilding competition, and then they came and they wanted to like make a documentary about him and so on and so forth. And so he actually said, there was a period where it was about spreading that passion for bodybuilding, right? There were people, actual individuals and groups of people that explicitly were working on this topic of, bringing the topic to the wider audience, sharing the passion, sharing the benefits, sharing all these details about it. And of course, again, fast forward to today, I was just at the gym earlier today, that, Supreme Court justices are working out, like presidents, it's almost like the opposite. It's almost like everybody's talking about fitness and health and food and nutrition and all these things that back then it wasn't such a big deal. And again, that didn't necessarily happen on accident, right? There were people educating, there were people sharing their passion. And then in particular, Arnold Schwarzenegger said that was intentional on his part. It was intentional for him not to just, oh, maybe I'll become a movie star and that's it, and I won't talk much about my passion for fitness and bodybuilding. That'll just be part of how I can be a movie star. No, he like explicitly kind of had a mission to continue to spread the passion for that topic. And it really ended up working out in the end. So again, I think this is kind of some of the mission here that we can have in building this. And I think we all can kind of get behind it. We already have our passion, just like he and his small crew of passionate bodybuilders did. But we can work together with the common goal of bringing that passion to the wider audience. Johan, go ahead. What did you have to share?
Yeah, thank you. You already in a way alluded to a few things, and that got my mind going. 2009 was the year 300 years of piano. So the Cristofori piano. Huh? And I've been to, it's either at the Metropolitan or at the Smithsonian in Washington. And I've seen it at one of the convention tours. It may be a good place to start a kind of history channel. Just to keep it this short, we can think and talk about it. And another thing is, in that year, I put together an hour-long presentation, calling it 300 Years of Pianos, and as a subtitle, the problems piano makers ran into and had to overcome, focusing on that aspect. So rather than doing something on the final product, no, what were the struggles the piano makers had to go through? That may be an interesting topic, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then I have a third one as well. I don't know if the name David Crombie rings a bell with you. He's from England, and he sends out very frequently emails about interesting topics about pianos. And,
how do you spell the last name?
Crombie, Crombie.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, you can look him up from England. And I can send you a link otherwise. The thing is, through him, I became aware of Buckingham Palace. So what I'm thinking of, writing a letter to King Charles. Every room in Buckingham Palace, now don't ask me, there may be 100 rooms, has a piano. And really special pianos.
Wait, you know that? Like that's a fact? Or you're wondering?
Yeah.
I know that. I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. And the thing is, that these were pianos that were specifically constructed by the various piano makers over the years related to the King of England.
Wow.
And I'm sure the same is true for other countries like Austria, Germany,
Yeah.
because they have that same principle, where
Yeah.
you then get a recognition that you can put on your insignia on the piano that, the king has bought one of your, well, you've given it to the king, of course, or the queen. And so you get that recognition just as a way of promoting your instrument. And
I love
so I am thinking, you with your new camera that you talked about, may want to go to Buckingham Palace and make a documentary of, say, I'm just kidding, but say 100 pianos that they have there, the really special ones made by all the piano makers to get this recognition.
Yeah.
And there's an Erard piano that is all in gold leaf.
Wow.
And hand carved.
Wow.
Just to give one example, that's the one that David Crombie presented at one time.
Okay.
This is before King Charles became king, but it stuck out in my mind, in my memory. You know.
I love that. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll take you off spotlight while we discuss further, but yeah, this is exactly. There's so many stories, right? And it really just comes down to, you know. Again, I feel like I'm particularly positioned to approach this type of content building, you know, even down to one of my piano tuning clients back in when I was tuning in New York City was a woman who worked with This American Life, which is a very famous podcast, you know, and she connected me with all sorts of folks that are building these type of shows. Right? They're very popular, and you know, so I know a little bit about how they get produced, right? And so if you look at a show like the Radiolab podcast, for example, I keep coming back to it. I hope at least some of you know about it. But you know, it really just comes down to they have a handful of people in their community and they pitch episodes, right? And there's some episodes that never get made, they got pitched, or there's some episodes where they gathered a good amount of content for it, but like it never came together. And so, you know, like you said, there's so many stories here about in pianos that you can make engaging. It really just comes down to, you know, increasing the volume, the quality of, you know, what stories could be told, and then investigating them and having people that investigate them and sort of pitch them, and then, you know, building them as we find like the cream will rise to the top in terms of the best stories. But I love that type of a story, right? You know, hey, let's talk about pianos in Buckingham Palace, right? Let's talk about piano. That made me think of pianos as a diplomacy. You know, when I lived in Peru, I worked, as some of you know from previous episodes, I met this guy who is a musical. He wasn't a musical diplomat. He was a diplomat that was musical, you know, so he was just a diplomat. He would live in different countries and represent Peru and communicate with them. But he also was an extremely talented musician, piano player, and he would give concerts, you know, wherever he lived, you know, just to kind of stay engaged and keep his practicing up and stuff like that. But, you know, there's stories, you know, he and I talked about where, you know, this country gave a piano to Korea, or Korea gave a piano to here, and it was a symbolic, you know, sort of way of connecting the two countries, you know. Really interesting stories that can come out of things like that, and if you tell it well, you know, it's great. And you know, I think that also leads to one of the topics that I think is worth addressing as we share these things. Let me see here. I see a comment from Kathy. I would love to just read it. There's a but, so that, or a however. It all sounds very interesting. However, I think that there should always be a technical segment in each telecast whereby we, as PTTs, are able to further enhance our abilities in the in-depth detail of, say, perhaps different steps of grand or upright regulation. This is what helps us support our knowledge and subsequent income. Great. So something in each episode that might have something to do with some sort of educational content to help improve skills in things like steps of grandeur, upright regulation, so on and so forth. Okay, great. Love that feedback. And again, anything you guys have, love to hear about it. Another comment here from Larry. An article just came out in a new magazine called Craftsmanship. It parallels the idea of popularizing interest in the piano. Check out the magazine. It's an article about a documentary film called Miracle in a Box, which Larry said he had a hand in producing. That's awesome. And put a link to that. That's awesome. Yeah, definitely want to check that out. So given that, I think this type of a show deserves a higher production quality. Let me talk through with you guys briefly, as someone who's experienced in this domain to a degree, who needs to be on a team like this? How complicated does it need to be? So I mentioned previously, having someone that does some sort of sound design, even a minimal amount, but does it well and tastefully, would be great to have on the team. And that could be a different person or the same person that edits, because you need somebody to edit the show, and you need them to be tasteful about it. There's certainly a ton of people out there who will cheaply edit a podcast content, but they don't necessarily know. They don't have. You would think it's easy, but it's not, to choose where to cut and paste and change the audio effects so that the sound quality is higher, and so on and so forth. It takes expertise to do things like this. So add an editor. And an editor in sound design could be the same person, could be a different person. I think a podcast like this deserves scripting. It deserves somebody who really knows how to tell a story, right? And is interested in putting a story together. So that's another sort of personality type, talent that I think this type of content deserves. And I would say that with those minimal additions, I think, some other people, I think this type of a show, when it comes down to it, it may not be obvious, but for me, I've got a ton going on, and it's actually, for me to host something like this, or, be the main narrator or whatever, it would be quite an undertaking, but I can help in the production of it and the masterminding of it and the designing of it. So, having 1 or 2 or 3 folks that can do things like conduct interviews with, celebrity piano players, tell the story, right? Like, be the voice behind the story that we're telling, whether it's a historical thing or something that's about, piano technical specifics or maintenance or, improvement of pianos and so forth. So it's probably need a handful of personalities that want to be a part of the narration of this and the storytelling aspect from the performative aspect. I would say that's like very minimal. If we can have a team like that, that's great. And then, you could expand from there. There's other positions that you could bring in, somebody very specifically focused on promotion. To be honest, a social media person is probably quite relevant as well. You'd probably need somebody to help promote on that end. And then as you expand from there, it's just, maybe you have a high level producer, maybe you have somebody who sells ads or, finds sponsorship and so on and so forth. But as you can see, to be honest, I have some of these skills myself. I can cut and paste and produce something that sounds great. I can record audio. I can host. I can, write a good story. Okay, right? But this is a thing where if one person tried to do it all, it would just never work. You need a good team. You need the team energy behind it. And so that leads to the idea that this would deserve some sort of, at least an advanced indication of financial feasibility, right? There would need to be some sort of foundational amount of funding, income, whatever, around this type of thing to really make it work. And I think to be smart about it, you've got to proceed in that fashion where you test your hypothesis about the financial feasibility, and you don't just sort of jump into it head first without any plan of action in terms of is this really have long-term feasibility. I have a little comment here I just want to mention. So Larry said Lou Delbany has many of the production skills that we're talking about, so that's useful to know. If we want to tap into the pool of celebrity piano techs, there are many who may be interested and available as narrators, storytellers. One that comes to mind is David Hughes, and there are others that you could call to mind, give them a little time. That's great. So a little bit about the funding behind this. I think there's a few avenues, and I'll briefly go into them. There's not a lot of time to delve as deeply as would do it justice, but getting some folks on board as sponsors, even really before you launch, would be invaluable. A brand, could be Steinway, Steingraber, Bosendorfer, it could be Parsons, it could be Gibson, whatever. There could be some sort of a sponsor that's brand. It could be some other type of organization. It could be multiple, right? And there's really cool ways that you can integrate those sponsors, right? You can tell stories about what they do. You can have them host episodes. You can tell their story, right? There's a lot of dealers, like larger dealers, that might be interested. At people in the education end of piano, piano lessons, but also like, teaching us folks, piano technicians, and so on and so forth. So the other thing I want to mention really briefly is this. There's two things I'm going to squeeze in here in the last couple of minutes. One is I think it would be useful to do some sort of, and again, this is not for sure, but I think, again, if we're going to move forward with it, it would be a useful step to do some sort of crowdfunding campaign. I don't know how many of you are familiar with crowdfunding, but it's something where you do kind of what I'm doing right here is you sort of pitch the idea, you give an idea of the details, what's going to be involved, and then you say to an audience of potential fans and supporters, would you like to donate, X amount of dollars, X amount of dollars, X amount of dollars, and usually there's some sort of reward for if you donate at certain levels. And really the donation is because you might want the reward, but also primarily because you're kind of voting with your dollars that this is an idea worth pursuing, that there's people that are interested in this. And so again, an example, maybe a film, there's crowdfunding campaigns that go around a film, and they say, hey, we want to make this film. Here's a little bit of footage that we already captured, or here's some storyboards, or here's a explanation of who the different team members we're going to have involved. And if you want to donate, $5, you'll get your name on on the credits. If you want to donate $50 and you get the DVD when it comes out, when you donate $150, you get to come to the screening and the opening party. And so basically, Kickstarter is a very common crowdfunding resource where things like this happen. But I think there would be a stage in the development of the project where, beyond seeking sponsors from like industry and organizations, it might be useful to both test the feasibility through the audience, if people want to support this, want to contribute to this, and raise awareness around it, all sorts of, and then actually raise some funds. So that might be a stage in the process. And then finally, right before we wrap up here, just something that I'm envisioning about this is, again, based on some of the production that I've done around these type of shows, it does help to think about it with some forethought, right? Like to not just go out tomorrow and say, oh, here's the first episode, here's what it sounds like. Taking a matter, I've already been sort of developing this concept for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months, and taking even more time to develop it, where, for example, this particular project might not launch until summertime 2024, for example. But in the meantime, I think what could be interesting is, in our platform here on Piano Tech Radio Hour, we can work together to develop this, and so again, we're running out of time today, but briefly, we might want to put together some pilot episodes, right, to test the feasibility. We might want to actually launch a podcast channel and see if we can get subscribers pre-launch. We might want to talk about the editing process or crowdsource ideas about, what should our first episode be about? We want to be about this or about this or about this, and let's vote. And so I can really see the potential if we take the long view on this and say, hey, yes, we want to pursue this idea. Let's do this over the course of several months. And not every radio hour episode, but maybe like once a month or something like that, we could do a check-in, or maybe we do like a 5 or 10 minute update every episode and say, here's the progress of this project. Here's where we could use your help. It's going well, it's not going well, so on and so forth. And so the vision there is to both develop it with the goal of launching it maybe 6 to 9 months from something like today, but also to test it. We're all excited about it, but let's just say there's a lot of, like, you do a crowdfunding campaign and nobody donates, or you can't find a sponsor, or you produce the first episode and you listen back and you say, oh, hey, well, that was pretty good, but it doesn't really keep the excitement level up. So there's always the opportunity as we kind of develop pre-launch to say, you can always let go and just move on, and sort of invest little bits as the feasibility sort of develops. So anyways, I really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of unload a lot of that stuff that's been in my head and get your guys' feedback and input. Of course, somebody's just letting someone in from the waiting room right now. Hi, Bob. Sorry, we're about to jump off the session, but thank you for joining. I'll read the last couple of comments. I'll sign us off. And we'll look forward to meeting you again next week. Next week, we'll have Hannah Reimann back talking about the Stretto piano. So that'll be another fun session with her and her connections. And let's look at the final comments that we didn't touch upon, and then I'll sign us off. So we have Karen says, during the pandemic, she ended up putting their local music club on YouTube. It was a trial by fire. I understand how very hard it is. Yes, it's you got your hit and misses. Another great raconteur is Horace Greeley. As Larry says, I think these comments are super valuable. These are directions we can pursue. Larry says, Miracle in a Box was made before crowdfunding existed, but did use a similar method of fundraising. It was financed by people interested in pianos and technicians. Very cool. Maybe there's some crossover there. I could definitely see you might as well do an episode on Piano in a Box, right? And just talking about that documentary and kind of doing a sort of overview and sort of promoting that movie. Johan says, one book that comes to mind is The Piano Tuner's Daughter by maybe Finley. I'm not sure the author's name. Miracle in the Box has a kind of very high production values we're talking about, directed by award-winning filmmaker John Cordy, narrated by famous actor John Lithgow. Yeah. I feel like I may have seen the whole thing, or maybe at least parts of it. If so, it's been a while ago. I'm definitely familiar with the name. Great. All right. So we covered all of the comments there. I'm glad we got to those. And thank you guys again so much for showing up here and potentially being a part of this and talking me through and sharing your ideas. It's all great stuff. And in the meantime, we'll sign it off. We'll say we've reached the end of another musical journey at the Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks again for everyone here who joined us today, and you guys out on the socials, Facebook, YouTube. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you joined us today just by signing for the session individually, you could make your life more convenient. You could subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour at just $16 a month. You'll get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You can sign up at www.pianotechniciansmasterclass.com/PTRH direct access. The short link for that is bit.ly/join PTRH, bit.ly/join PTRH. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you again next time. Have a great Saturday.